Okay, good morning. Welcome to the public agenda of the Police Services Board meeting for Thursday, February 22nd. Declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest on the board. I see none. Minutes of the previous meeting, I'd like to move in block, please, from items 19 to 22. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Member Ganzel, Member Stewart. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Member Ganzel.
Thank you, Chair. And this is item number 26. It's called Communications Dispatch. It's under it's a bylaw. No, sorry, it's a report to the board on stuff. I'm looking at all the different stats, and one of the things I see was a drop calls number.
Which minute are we talking about? The minutes
26.
of 26 is not the minute.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I forgot about it. Excuse me.
Never mind. Okay. All those in favor of the minutes? Carried. Next, reports from the board chairperson. Before we begin this public meeting, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed and will be posted on the board's YouTube channel following the meeting. In a moment, we'll have a moment of silence for Constable Nick Zarafinitis. First, I'd like to explain, before we begin today's meeting, I'd like to take a moment to remember Constable Nick Zarafinitis, an officer with our police service who passed away on February 15th. Constable Zarafinitis was a 28-year member of the NRPS and was most recently assigned to the Quality Assurance Unit. We are all saddened by his sudden loss and offer our sincere condolences to Nick's family and his many friends and colleagues throughout the service and across the region. I would ask everyone to stand for a moment of silence in memory of Nick. Thank you very much. Please be seated. And on a good event, or more pleasant news, the NRPS officers recognized for bravery. On behalf of the board, I'd like to extend congratulations to Constable Sheldon and Constable Cully, who were recognized by Her Excellency the Right Honourable Julie Payette during the Governor-General of Canada's presentation of honours ceremony held on February 20th at the Fairmont Royal York in Toronto. Both officers were recognized for their action taken during a family disturbance incident at a Vineland residence on July 5th, 2015. Constable Sheldon received the Star of Courage in recognition of his act of conspicuous courage in circumstances of great peril, and Constable Cully received the Medal of Bravery for his act of bravery in hazardous circumstances. The board echoes the media comments made by Chief McCullough that the bravery of these two officers is indeed a true testament to the strength of their character and underscores the brave acts that sometimes go unnoticed each and every day by the men and women who proudly wear the NRPS uniform. The board would also like to thank each and every member of the Niagara Regional Police Service for the great work they do to enhance the quality of life and safety in the Niagara region. I'll be asking the Chief to expand on that during your notes, Chief, if you can. State of the Region. On March 28th, Regional Chair Caslin will be delivering his State of the Region address to the Niagara business community to highlight the accomplishments of Regional Council. This event is being held from 11 to 2 at the Scotiabank Convention Centre here in Niagara Falls. Vice Chair Ganzel, members Barrick, Bonham, and Stewart, the board's Executive Director, Chief McCullough, Deputies Flynn and Forty, and I will be in attendance. Last, this was a short one, upcoming PSB meetings. The next board committee meeting is scheduled to be held on Thursday, March 8th, and the regular monthly board meeting is on Thursday, March 22nd, all the time at 8:30 here in this meeting. Reports from the Chief of Police, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd just echo the comments with regards to Constable Sheldon and Constable Cully. I had the privilege of attending at the Fairmont Royal York Hotel on Tuesday for the ceremony where they were presented with their medals from the Right Honourable General Governor. It was a pretty humbling experience. There were a total of 59 members, Canadians, who all received medals on that particular day for various categories. It was very humbling to be able to share in the experience with both Dale and Phil's families who were there, and obviously very proud of their husband, father, and sons, I guess.
Chief, while you're on the subject, how are they doing?
They're doing well. The one officer, Dale Cully, is back to work, and he's working in our child abuse unit, our domestic violence unit now. And as well, Phil continues his recovery, but he's making every effort to get back to work full time. So thank you for that. Just with regards to some additional announcements, I just want to provide an update with regards to the Port Colborne Situation Table, also known as Port All. The Port All Situation Table commenced operation on February 15th, 2018. This ongoing initiative where partners from various community agencies bring forward situations of persons potentially suffering from an acutely elevated risk of harm. Once an acutely elevated risk of harm has been identified, further identifying information is provided, and the participating agencies that are best able to assist will meet. Then these agencies will develop a collaborative intervention strategy to reduce the risk factors, with the goal of implementing the strategy within 24 to 48 hours. The initiative is funded by a grant received from the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services, and training was provided by the Global Network for Community Safety. Presently, 12 community agencies are participating in Port All, including the Niagara Regional Police, Bridges Community Health Center, Port Cares, Gateway of Niagara, Canadian Mental Health Association, Family and Children's Services Niagara, Contact Niagara, City of Port Colborne, Bylaw Department, the Region Niagara Community Mental Health, Community Addiction Services of Niagara, and Pastones Mental Health. The community agencies provide the meeting space and one representative to serve as a data entry operator using an established risk tracking database, which is designed specifically by the ministry and used by other situation tables in the province. The 6th District Commander, Staff Sergeant Chris Healy, is the project coordinator and chairperson for those weekly meetings. We also have another rep from our 3-district detective office that sits at the situation table. Since its inception, Port All has had 2 meetings, and there's been 4 cases in which intervention strategies have been or about to be implemented in each of those cases. Those meetings will take place on a weekly basis for about an hour and a half moving forward. An automated license plate recognition technology update. The traffic enforcement unit has been utilizing the automated license plate recognition technology. The NRPS has installed an ALPR system in one of the traffic enforcement vehicles in August, as you'll recall, and we recently purchased a second system that was budgeted in 2018. Since its implementation, the ALPR initiative has issued over 1,000 provincial offense notices for Part 1 and Part 3 offenses. The technology captures license plates and reads the data through the onboard computer to detect expired and stolen plates, expired validation stickers, and confirms whether or not the registered owner of the license plate is a licensed or a suspended driver. So it's very encouraging, and we've had great results by using that technology. With regards to marijuana grow operations, at the end of January 2018, there was an estimated street value of $2.7 million of illegal marijuana that was seized. And for homicides, I just want to report that we've had 1 homicide thus far in 2018. Comparatively, we had 3 for 2017, 1 in 2016, and 6 in 2015. Provide a little bit of an update with regards to the homicide. So on Saturday, February 3rd, at approximately 10 a.m., police were called to a property on Pettit Road near Sutherland Drive in Fort Erie to check on the welfare of an individual. As a result of the nature of the information that we received, members of the Emergency Task Unit and negotiators responded to the area. At approximately 3:15 p.m., a male was taken into custody without incident upon leaving the property. Human remains were subsequently located on the property, and as a result, the scene was secured. An investigation is being led by our homicide unit and members of the forensic services unit who were there at the scene for several days. Investigators will be working in conjunction with medical experts in an effort to positively identify the victim. James Dylan Osborne, 32 years of Fort Erie, has been charged with first-degree murder and causing an indignity to a dead human body. With regards to robberies in Niagara, in the month of January, there were 13 robberies. 7 of those were cleared, and 6 remain under investigation for a clearance rate of about 54%. Knock on wood, thus far in January stats, we have 0 fatalities. We've had 2 life-threatening motor vehicle collisions, which I'll provide a brief summary for each of those. So the first one at approximately 6 p.m. on Thursday, January the 11th, Niagara Regional Police responded to reports of a pedestrian being struck by a vehicle on Niagara Street near Geneva Street in the city of St. Catharines. Initial investigation revealed that a 2002 Chevy Impala was being driven northbound on Niagara Street by an 82-year-old St. Catharines male when a 32-year-old St. Catharines female crossing Niagara Street and walking westbound stepped into the path of the motor vehicle. The female pedestrian suffered life-threatening injuries and was transported to the local hospital and then transferred to an out-of-town hospital in critical condition. The driver of the Chevrolet did not suffer any physical injuries in this collision, and it remains under investigation by detectives from our collision reconstruction unit. The second one occurred at approximately 9:55 p.m. on Thursday, January the 11th. We responded to reports of a pedestrian being struck by a motor vehicle on Dieppe Road near Nielsen Avenue in St. Catharines. Initial investigation revealed that a 21-year-old St. Catharines male was walking on Dieppe Road when he was struck by a 2006 Lexus SUV that was being driven by a 72-year-old St. Catharines male. Pedestrian suffered life-threatening injuries and was transported to a local hospital before being transferred to an out-of-town hospital in critical condition. The driver of the Lexus did not suffer any injuries, and this collision also remains under investigation by our collision reconstruction unit. Some items in the news. I just want to talk about a graffiti spree that ended in multiple charges. Incidents occurred between January 16th, 2018 and January 25th in neighborhoods in the northwest area of Welland. During this time, officers in Welland received numerous complaints of vehicles and residents that had been spray painted. The complainants in these incidents reported that in overnight hours their properties were sprayed with paint, and in some cases the graffiti included vulgar words and images. On January 25th at approximately 3 a.m., uniformed officers and detectives from 3 District arrested 2 individuals while they were committing multiple acts of mischief in a residential neighborhood. As a result of the investigation, 2 youths, a 17-year-old male and a 15-year-old female, have been charged with 24 counts of mischief of a value not exceeding $5,000. And due to the provisions of the Youth Criminal Justice Act, the identity of the youths cannot be disclosed. We do not believe that the complainants in these incidents were specifically targeted and that the acts were in fact random. The Niagara Regional Police are actively investigating an overnight shooting that occurred at a hotel in Niagara Falls on, it wasn't overnight, it's dating back to January 28th at approximately 3:30 a.m. 2 District uniform officers from Niagara Falls were at a local hotel in the area of Lundy's Lane and Kayla Road in Niagara Falls. So they were there for an unrelated investigation when a member of the public alerted them to an ongoing robbery. Robbery was taking place in one of the rooms, and a firearm was believed to be involved. As officers were receiving the information from the members of the public, they heard a gunshot. Officers moved towards the room as numerous other NRPS units responded to the scene from around the city. Officers found 2 males suffering from serious gunshot wounds. Officers conducted a high-risk arrest of 3 persons from a hotel room. They were subsequently transported to the Central Prisoner Management Unit in Niagara Falls. 2 injured parties initially received treatment locally and then were transferred out of region. And detectives from the 2-district criminal investigation branch continue to investigate this incident with the assistance of our forensic services unit. Detectives in this case believe that this was a targeted incident and that there were no other suspects outstanding. In 2018, members of the Niagara Regional Police Service Welland Street Crime Unit commenced an investigation with the assistance of the RCMP into allegations that a male who was on bail for previous drug charges was actively selling in the city of Welland. And on January 31st, the investigation concluded with the arrest of a male who was found to be in possession of over $2,500 worth of suspected cocaine and heroin. And a 55-year-old Welland resident is facing numerous drug-related charges. On Thursday, February 1st, the Opioid Enforcement Unit concluded a fentanyl trafficking investigation in the city of Niagara Falls, and a 40-year-old female was charged with trafficking in fentanyl. In May of 2017, detectives from 2-district criminal investigation branch were alerted to concerns over a suspicious male frequenting parking lots in the casino district of the city of Niagara Falls. Detectives commenced an investigation and were able to identify a suspect. On February 4th, with the assistance of Durham Regional Police, a 38-year-old Pickering, Ontario male was arrested and charged with 2 counts of criminal harassment. In January of 2018, members of the Niagara Regional Police Opioid Enforcement Unit began an investigation into the trafficking of fentanyl. On February 6th, the investigation was concluded with the arrest of 2 individuals in the city of Hamilton. A 29-year-old Niagara Falls male and a 34-year-old Hamilton male are charged with various drug-related offenses. And in that investigation, we seized over 15 grams of fentanyl with a potential value of $4,500. And also seized was $2,650 in currency and a digital scale. I want to talk about a positive news story that resulted from the use of Project Lifesaver. We've reported to the board previously on that technology. So during the course of an exhaustive search, it was learned that a missing St. Catharines male was registered with Project Lifesaver. Upon being made aware of this information, members of our service utilized specially outfitted mobile receivers and were able to safely locate the individual. Project Lifesaver Niagara is a non-profit organization dedicated to assisting and responding to the challenge caregivers have of finding loved ones who, due to their cognitive ability, have a tendency to wander. Participants registered with Project Lifesaver wear a personalized bracelet. It is a 1-ounce battery-operated radio wrist transmitter that emits a unique automatic tracking signal once every second, 24 hours a day. Project Lifesaver equips and trains law enforcement agencies in an active response system to help with the increasing problems of locating wandering people before they fall victims to the elements, accidents, or predators. Project Lifesaver saves lives and further serves the community by significantly reducing the need for extensive search and rescue operations that are often extremely costly in human and in financial terms. So that's a very good news story that the gentleman was found. And finally, in January 2018, members of the Niagara Falls Street Crime Unit began investigating the sale of heroin and methamphetamine in the city of Niagara Falls. On February 15th, officers arrested a male in relation to the drug trafficking and subsequently executed a Controlled Drug and Substance Act search warrant at the 33-year-old Niagara Falls male's apartment. Total, officers seized 43.7 grams of heroin, 58.2 grams of crystal methamphetamine, 19.95 grams of cocaine, as well as a number of Percocets. Total street value of the drugs was in excess of $24,000. And that's all I have at this point in time. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Member Gansell first.
Thank you, Chair, and to the chief and his men. and women. Several things. First, the news on the Port Colborne Port All, is it called? Excellent news. As you know, I think I attended the very first, I guess, introductory meeting probably 2 years, maybe 2.5 years ago. And I'm just so grateful that this has finally gotten going in an area that I think needs our services, and I think this will be a major benefit to the residents there, and I hope it will be a model which might be built in other communities here in the region. The automatic license recognition system. I saw one on Saturday, saw one yesterday. Now, whether that's the original vehicle, was the black SUV, and I don't know whether the other one is a black SUV as well, but I'm glad to see that was on the road. They both had vehicles stopped. One item on the Project Lifesaver, which again I saw demonstrated probably a year or 2 years ago at the Emergency Task Force facility. I took from your comments that the person reporting the missing individual was not aware of the device he was wearing, or was not aware of it, that was a trackable device. What I'm getting at, are we finding issues with what I call the caregiver community not knowing that their patient has that product, and which could result in delay of saying, well, he's lost, and does he have a lifesaver? Well, we don't know. Are we running into a situation such as that?
No, and that if I misled the board, I apologize for that. No, the caregivers were aware, and that's part of the condition of them enrolling their loved one in the Project Lifesaver program, is that they have to be fully on board with the program. Okay,
very good. Thank you. All good news items. Thank you again.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Chief. I too want to speak very positively about the hub model pilot project underway in Port Colborne. I was there sitting beside Member Ganzel at the initial meeting and saw how positively received it was by our fellow agencies that all provide supports to the community. But I really have a question about it. I know it took a while to get it going because, you know, of looking for some grant money seed money to get things started. I'm just wondering if you could enlighten us on what is the timeline for the pilot. At what point will there be some sort of a formal evaluation? I know the pilot will feel its way along and make adaptations, and that's why we do a pilot. But I'm just wondering if you have a timeline of when there will be an evaluation to see how this model, and I think following that, how this model might be replicated in other communities. If you could elaborate on that, please.
So, thank you for the question. Our plan is to run the pilot for a year and then do an assessment, and throughout the project, or the pilot project portion, constantly assess and reassess if there needs to be changes. We'll make those changes midstream if necessary. Right now we have 12 partner agencies that are involved in Port All, and we may find that that there are more that need to come into the fold as well. And I know that there's at least one other partner agency that unfortunately wasn't able to make it for the training that occurred, but they do plan on joining in as well. So we'll do a reassessment of that at the year mark. And then with the Ontario Safer Ontario Act, there is a provision for situation tables to be part of the strategy going forward. So this should provide a very good framework for us going forward to roll that out into other communities that are in a similar situation of need.
Thank you, and again through you, Chair. I'm just wondering if it's possible for the board to perhaps get an update maybe in 6 months, which would probably give a substantial chunk of data to see how it's going, how it's been effective or not effective. You know, not a full-blown evaluation, but sort of an update on how it's going, and then, of course, a year from now, looking forward to a successful project, which I firmly believe it will be, and then looking at saying how can we expand this concept out there. So I'm just wondering if that's, I'm not going to make a motion about it, but would that be possible for the service to give us that update, you know, say 6 months from now?
Yeah, that's completely doable, and I know it's premature, but certainly the first 2 meetings were incredibly successful, and I know in speaking with Staff Sergeant Healy, he was totally impressed with the collaborative efforts of all involved, and that was part of the issue as well initially, is just getting past that that fear of sharing information, which for years has been protected, and but I think now that everybody's on the same page and realizing that they're all working towards a common goal of assisting people who are at elevated risk of harm and working collaboratively to reduce that harm. I think everybody's working great, and it should be a very successful project.
Member Barrick.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Chief. Thanks again for your extensive report and all the work that you do and the service does on a day-to-day basis. With respect to the Port Colborne Hub model, which I think is fantastic, it fits perfectly within the business plan. I know there's been a lot of work, a lot of time put into that collaborative effort and the partnerships that exist there, possibly as a model to be expanded elsewhere. What are we doing to, I guess, communicate this pilot, if not regionally, then at least locally? Is there anything that we're putting out? I know the immediate stakeholders at the table are aware. I'm not sure outside of that table who is aware of what's going on and why.
I believe we put out a media release on it. If we haven't, I'll ensure that we do. A lot of times, the nature of the intervention that's required, it may not. It's probably best that the information is within a limited number of agencies. But in the fact that it's out there, that we have this collaborative situation table operating and running in one of our communities for the benefit of the members of that community is a good news story. And if we haven't gotten it out, we'll make sure that we do get it out.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. And just further, and I know it's collaborative, but is there a lead? Is there an agency that takes the lead in this model?
So in this model, it's Staff Sergeant Healy who is chairing the meetings, and each situation that's presented at the table is reviewed on the merits of the case, and there's a determination made at that time as to who will take the lead going forward. The recognition is that the vast majority of the cases that come to situation tables are not police problems, but because we're in some cases, the call of last resort, people call the police, they're calling us, they're calling EMS, they're calling a number of different agencies, and it's a matter of getting that situation to the table, and then the various agencies that can coordinate an intervention to deal with the various risks that are presented, and they'll coordinate amongst themselves as to who is going to take the lead with regards to that specific individual.
That's great. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just in furtherance to the Chief's answer there, I think that it would be safe to say that in this model and in other models or tables across the province and the country, the police have typically led the initiative, but over the course of time, you will see that transition out of the police's hands as the leaders. In other words, we build the model for the community, and then the model sustains itself. That answers your question as well.
Thank you very much for that, and I'll echo the same comments on Port Colborne. I know Member Marshall and Member Stewart were there at the start, as well as Member Ganzel, and I think it was about 3 years ago I was there for the meeting too. So on behalf of the community, I was going to say thank you to all three of you guys, but we have Cindy White as acting deputy chief today for these meetings, so and the service for this is on behalf of the community. This is a good one, and thank you for getting it going. My question is about the automated license technology in that vehicle. I'm so proud of that because I hear from people on the street, especially the people at the license bureau, saying that's the talk out there. Like people that haven't got val tags forever, and that, or whatever example, are coming in now, because this, I've seen it sitting on the hill going down to St. David's and other places. And some people still don't get it. My question is, how many criminal charges? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you have that stat now, or can we get it down the way?
I don't have that stat right now, but we can certainly look into that. The majority of those charges would likely be a result of prohibited driving. So where somebody, you can be suspended driver provincially and federally, usually as a result of impaired driving convictions. But we can get that stat for you.
And a concern we had was that an officer, for the sake of a, I'll use an example, a VALTAG ticket, wouldn't do a spin around on Lundy's Lane and get into an accident as a result. We've had no accidents with this vehicle as a result of using it in that?
No, we've not had any accidents yet with that vehicle.
I see behind you, George Bench is not.
You've cursed
Sorry,
us
I
now,
shouldn't have
but,
said that, but okay. No, that's a good job. Thank you very much. So next we have presentations. I'm going to ask Member Ganzel to introduce the next people for the presentation, but I'll get a mover and seconder first on this, on the crime reports. A mover and seconder, please. Member Barrick, Member Ganzel. And just before Ken talks, I'd like to say, I know a lady's here from CHCH. If it's about this, I defer you to Ken for an interview afterwards if you're here for this. She left. Kill that. But if anybody's here for interviews on crime mapping and that, please, I defer to Ken, because he's so proud of it, as is the service. This is great for the public and that. So, Ken, if you don't mind introducing the people for the crime, for this.
Okay, Chair, thank you very much, and good morning again. This is the report, which is number 23 in our agenda. It's entitled Crime Reports. I just want to say that, and I know the Chief will talk about this in great detail, but 3 years ago, we entered into an agreement with Motorola, and I think we were one of the, probably the first in Canada to tap into that resource, to put together a command central aware platform, which included the crime mapping, which is which is going to allow for public-facing information on crime statistics and where crimes are within the region. I also know that this was one of our major objectives in our business plan, and the Chief, I'm sure, will talk to that briefly as well. I can't say how proud I am of this police service of moving forward with this from a technology perspective, as a public perspective of giving tools to the public as to where crimes are. I hear it from the Community Safety Committee that I sit on in Niagara Lake, that we're always asking as to where trends are. I certainly know from Mr. School's department as the Director of Information Technology, and Tara Henderson, I believe, is involved in this, because I saw her name on the report. I'm sure Bill Forty, because he heads up all of that, and Superintendent White, representing the operational side, I'm sure is impressed by
Everybody you say is shaking their head. Somebody was involved in it.
I hope they are. But I mean, it's not just the folks that are in front of us today. I mean, we have close to 800 officers on the road that are patrolling and actively responding to crimes and other situations out there. So rather than try to take a lot of thunder away, I just want to say how impressed I am that this is finally launching. I think this is an extremely good news story. I think this is another step that makes the Niagara Regional Police Service one of the top police services, not only in Ontario, but in Canada. So, Chief?
Thank you very much for those comments, Member Ganzel, and you're quite right. We've had a great partnership with Motorola over the years, and as part of our business plan, we've been working towards our goal of leveraging technology to give us better situational awareness of what's going on, both out on the road, but also with the crime mapping tool to be able to provide members of the community with a better perspective on what's going on in their communities. So I think when you ask the question as to who's been involved in it, the reality is it's touched a lot of people, and as we know with policing now, there's a heavy influence on IT, which plays a big role in virtually every project that we do. So ACRAM's staff of 20 has been heavily involved in this project and many other technology projects that are assisting us in meeting the objectives of our business plan. So we're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish with regards to this new crime mapping tool. And without further ado, I'm going to call upon Deputy Forty. Are you going to do the introduction?
I thought Member Genzel was.
I don't know all the names.
I'll do it then.
I mentioned quite a number, but I'm sure there's a lot more because I see Chris Bell in the audience and a few others from IT. So
It's going to be Constable Kevin McGrath, who is a former IT member who has patched over and become a uniform officer for us, and he's been heavily involved in the project. So I'll have him walk us through the presentation. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
thank you. Kevin, it's your show. Now, I know they set up a notebook computer this morning, which may or may not be the one that you're able to use.
That would be great. I can't seem to get my computer to connect. If you give me just a moment, I'll have
Okay,
everything
no
ready
problem. We face that quite often in this room.
Just in the interim, Vice Chair, I just want to highlight and acknowledge the term patched over. Did I catch that right?
Yes, you caught that right, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's all right. It's a common motorcycle term, so it's quite acceptable.
Awesome, right on.
So I'd be remiss if I also didn't include Gary Holden, the manager of records, who, as you can imagine, with this project, there's a fair bit of privacy concerns. So he oversees all of our FOI requests and whatnot. So he is our go-to person with regards to that.
While we're waiting for the setup, just a real quick question. What other services in Ontario, like Hamilton or Halton, are using something like this or providing public access to crime mapping or crime information?
I'm thinking that Kevin may be best to answer that question as to who other or what other police services are using the crime mapping tool.
I'd be happy to defer that question to my Sergeant Tara Henderson.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Off of the top of my head, I believe it's Halton. I know Ottawa, Windsor, and York. Is Durham? Yeah, and York. Sorry, and that's just off the top of my head. And that would be through crime reports. I believe there's some other services that are doing public-facing crime mapping on their website, and they're doing that internally. But they're still providing those stats.
Okay, thank you very much. I was always hoping we'd be number one, but we'll take number 5.
Well, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present this significant step forward for us. I feel obliged to point out that this is obviously, as has been mentioned, a collaborative effort between numerous subject matter experts. I would simply argue that I am least among them, but it is my honor to present this report to you today. So, the Niagara Crime Reports is going live today. A bit of background. At the public PSB meeting on March 24th, 2016, the board approved entering into a 3-year agreement with Motorola Solutions Canada for the acquisition of the Command Central Aware solution. And one of the deliverables of that was a citizen engagement tool, namely Crime Reports, that publishes crime and incident data from our CAD, or computer-aided dispatch system. In alignment with the business plan, this accomplishes metric 4.6.3, specifically launching an internet-based crime mapping tool. And as a summary, the NRPS is committed to innovative and responsive community policing, which is why we are providing public access to NRPS crime reports. The crime mapping tool can be defined as a virtual conversation with our communities. It continues NRPS's efforts to provide neighborhoods with valuable information about recent crime activity, and therefore the ability to be more vigilant and implement crime awareness and prevention efforts in their homes, workplaces, and community. Crime Reports visualizes crime activity statistics by placing colored-coded pins on a map to represent occurrences. Users can access and browse an occurrence as shown on a map by type, time, and general location, block or cross street. An occurrence event is represented as a reasonable approximation of the location of the event occurring in a community while at the same time addressing privacy concerns. Access is free and data can be viewed from any computer or mobile device anytime, anywhere. On the topic of privacy and address generalization, so addresses for calls deemed sensitive are rewritten to the nearest cross street, and addresses for non-sensitive calls are randomized based on this algorithm. If a location does not have a numerical address, it's left as is. If it has a numerical address that's 2 digits or less, it is set to 0. And if a location has a numerical address of 3 or more digits, the last 2 digits are set to 2 zeros. So for example, these grayed out numerical addresses would be converted to the cross streets seen below in the second image. And these, for instances, in these incidents, the addresses would be converted to the 2 zeros, or in the case of 3 or more digits, drop down to the final 2 digits being zeros. Call types are categorized, so more generally than we specifically have them in our system. So CAD's calls are selected and published to crime reports based on their final case type. And while we have significantly more categories that we apply to calls for service, they're grouped into these, I believe it's 28 categories for publication. So for example, these case types you can see on the top, theft belated, in the case for publication would be turned into a theft, and so on. And just a summary of the disclaimer, the incidents that we have on our public website, these incidents are, do not represent an exhaustive list of all NRPS incidents. The information is not in real time. There's a natural 2 to 3 day delay in processing the data. And it also serves to protect ongoing investigations, identities of victims and witnesses. NRPS makes no warranties, basically, regarding the data. Sex offender data is not published. And the full disclaimer is on our website. We'll view that in a second. So just in summary, the incidents depicted are not exhaustive of all NRPS incidents. Some incidents are not publicized to protect ongoing police investigations, police techniques, or the identity of victims and witnesses. Addresses are restricted to their cross street or block address for privacy reasons. Categorization summarizes calls into broader groups. And the content of a crime incident, such as description, address, call remarks, and so on, never leaves the NRPS network. And so I believe we've been asked to give a brief demonstration. I'm happy to do that now. So as of right now, this is our public website, and I'll just refresh it so we can see that. This is live. And our first banner item right now says crime reports. Simply clicking that brings us to the disclaimer, which you can view in detail later. And in order to access the crime reports website from here, I click that I have read and agreed to the terms, and I'm presented with the crime reports website. And you can see here, by default, the last 2 weeks are being displayed. You can search specific addresses if you wish. Users can interact on numerous levels. Calls are listed to the right here in this pop-out menu. They're categorized. For right now, what's being displayed is violent property-related crimes or quality of life crimes, and those trends are shown in small graphs. I can click a specific incident and note that I can view the incident number. I can view the block address, the incident type. Obviously, Niagara Regional Police Service as the responding agency, but I can't see anything specific about the narrative of that incident, so I don't see who complained, any specifics about the narrative. Filters can change any number of settings that a user might be interested in. I can, for instance, specify an exact date range or the past 3 days. Interesting to note, because of the data, the delay, The natural delay in publishing data, clicking the last 3 days obviously shows far fewer items than have actually occurred in those last 3 days. But the past 3 months shows significantly more. When there's a lot of information, those events are summarized. For instance, you can see here 4 violent crimes and 18 property crimes occurred in this polygon. If I click that, it'll zoom and show me more detail about those specific incidents. And again, filters can be applied for any number of interests that users might want to look at. And if they wish, they can choose different map views like satellite and terrain. And I think with that, I'll open it up to questions if that's all right.
Members of the board. Member Ganzel.
I would be extremely remiss by not saying this is one of the most impressive things I've seen, especially this mapping detail. I'm just almost ecstatic about what's been presented today. And I think this is such a major improvement and a major direction of this service. Unbelievable, that's all I can say. And Kevin, yourself, Chief, deputies, various superintendents, inspectors, detective sergeants, everybody else who's put their effort, Mr. Holden from FOI and everything. I think everybody here needs to be commended on this. It took us a little bit over 2 years to get here, but I have to say this is probably one of the this is the most worthwhile efforts I have seen, and I'm so extremely impressed about this. I do just have one question. You talked about adding zeros, an extra zero, let's say, to a call that comes in at 99 something street. If you run into a situation where you have a call comes in a range somewhere between 1 and 150, and you may get 100, do you run a potential of actually identifying a house? Let's say there is 100 Main Street, which didn't report the crime or anything else. How do you avoid that situation? Because by adding the extra 2 zeros to something, you could hit a valid address within that range.
I can offer one response to that, if you don't mind. I can. The way the data is presented is not as, for instance, 4500 Drummond Road, where that is or could be a specific address. It's represented as the 4500 block, if you right here for Drummond Road. So when it is a block address, there is that added piece of information. It does identify that it's the 4500 block. But
yeah, I see it. I see it also in the next one down on Keefe Street. Also says the same. But do you actually, would there be a possibility that there's actually a 6100 itself?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just sort of explain the process that we went through when we decided how we were going to break these addresses up. So we're bound by, obviously, how Motorola reports, right? We had looked at block addresses, we had looked at intersections, and we had certainly taken into consideration the fact that we don't want to identify any victims or residences when we're reporting this. So if it's showing up as 100 Main Street, if you go thoroughly through the disclaimer, what it explains, like Kevin had tried to say, is basically it's a block address. So we have to map it somewhere. So what we would do is we would take anything that's within that 100 block, and it would be mapped at 100. The other way that we looked at sort of mapping things was, say if you're looking in some of the rural areas and you've got an address on a very rural street, and to identify that block address would clearly identify the residents involved or any of the parties involved in that. We had looked at intersection-related addresses as well. So we've gone through and tried to fine-tune it as best as we can so that it's going to be representative of a block. It's going to be mapped as 100, and there may be a 100 specific to that street. However, if you go through the disclaimer and the way we've explained it, that encompasses that entire block. So it's the 100 block, it's the 200 block, it's the 300 block, but it would be mapped per se at 100. And then the other caveat would be is if we're looking at something where we could potentially identify a specific address, then we would map it such that it's going to be at the closest intersection. I don't know if that explains it a little bit better. I guess there is the potential that 100 could be mapped as 100, but it's showing that entire block. Right. Yeah. Yeah, so like what Akram was just saying, so I mean, if it's, you know, it's mapped at 100, it could be 101, 102, 103, 104, what have you, but it's going to show on the map as around the 100 block. It's not going to identify a specific address.
Okay, thank you very much.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, just, I guess, following up on that topic. I wonder if there's going to be a point of evaluation on this. Just in practical terms, I mean, there's an old joke about when you install updates on your computer, you just go to click I agree and nobody ever really reads the disclaimer. I'm just wondering if it might lead to some problems, not in what we're sending, but how it's received with the public. And I hope that we'll be monitoring that, you know, from the privacy point of view, because if there is, as the example given, if there is a 100 house on that block and people have gone to the bottom, clicked the disclaimer and never read it, they may interpret that as it is that address, 100 Main Street. And I have concerns about that, and it's going to be one of those categories where, A, did we do something wrong, or was it interpreted incorrectly, but we could still end up with some awkward situations. So I'm wondering if there's a way to publicly clarify that better than just, you know, read this long disclaimer. You know what I'm getting at? I'm just wondering if there's a way just to make sure the public, as best we can, truly understands that it is not 100 Main Street, it is the 100 block. Anyway, I throw that out, you know, just because the disclaimer, you just whisk by it, and I will bet you 8 out of 10 people will whisk by it, go to the bottom and click it. So somehow can we have it, maybe in addition to the disclaimer, have it right up front, how to use this and that, what it really means. Maybe we'll catch more people that way and make them understand it. That's just, you know, my only, I don't get me wrong, I support this. I think it's terrific for communities to be able to understand what's going on in their general communities. I'm very supportive of it. I just don't want unintended consequences.
So through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps I can answer that a little bit better for you. So we actually spent a lot of time and effort going through that disclaimer, and I know it's very lengthy, and the reason it's very lengthy is to ensure that we've covered off all of the privacy issues. And in order to actually access the data, you have to go through that disclaimer and agree to that disclaimer, and I recognize that not everybody's going to read it. However, if you do read it thoroughly, it does thoroughly explain that we are not going to be identifying any addresses and that there will be block addresses, and it will be part of a block. The other piece we can do is we will be doing a public media release. As part of that public media release, we can certainly, you know, throw absolutely add something into the media release. And then the third piece to that is I will be overseeing and monitoring anything that happens through this. So if any privacy issues come up, I will certainly address those issues and continue to monitor the progress of crime reports.
Any other questions? Member Barrick.
Thank you, Chair. Great work. Thank you very much. The report is really well done, the presentation. I really love that we nail it down to the business plan, goals, objectives, 4.6, metric 4.6.3, very precise, results-based. And I remember when this report came forward a couple of years ago, and I gotta say, Chair, acknowledge that this board has, I'm going to go out there and say it, been the most transparent board in the history of this organization with respect to public meetings, live streaming, anything we can make public, we do make public, including retirement packages, and now online crime reporting as well. So I think it's great. Welcome to the 21st century. And I was just online when you were doing the presentation. It's very user-friendly, very well done, easy, simple, information at the fingertips. So my question is, one, how do we let people know that this tool exists now? And also, can we create an app for this in terms of greater accessibility rather than going through the website every time?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll answer your first question with regards to how do we let the public know. So we put out a media advisory last night. We're obviously doing it live streaming today. There will be a media release going out following, and I believe we've reached out to the board and asked for Member Ganzel's comments on that as well. And it's going to be on our website. So I think we've done our due diligence in notifying the public that this tool is now accessible to them. With regards to the app, at this point in time, we do not have the capabilities to have an app for this. This is a third-party software program that we're using, and we can't necessarily create that app internally through our organization. So unfortunately, at this point in time, that's not available. Certainly something we can look at developing in the future, though.
I'm sorry, if I could just add to Sergeant Henderson's remarks very quickly through you, Mr. Chair. The website, as I'm sure you've noticed, because I see you're using a tablet there, it does dynamically resize based on the side of the screen that the user is using. So if, for example, I can pull this together about the size of what a cell phone would look like. And it does end up adapting dynamically to that screen size, so you're not faced with a difficult user interface because you have a smaller screen. You can still interact with it almost intuitively, or just as intuitively as you would on your desktop. So it's not an app, but it's built into its design to work well on a mobile device.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So once again, kudos to you and your team, Chief. Appreciate this. Is great news. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, I'm looking through you, Chief, at Inspector McCaffrey at the back corner, and right off the bat, we had a conversation today about this being an election year, and it's popular for councillors throughout to ask for more officers because there's crimes here, there's crimes there, and we know there isn't, or most of the time there isn't. So now I look at the benefit of not having to go out and have a meeting and just saying, look at this area, there hasn't been that many crimes. You know, and more officers are justified by crime. It's not on the amount of taxes we pay. So for a benefit there, I'm so happy for this. And please stay if you're going to answer questions, stay at the podium if you don't mind, because I'm coming back to you for a second. And I get it with real estate brokers and people like this. They love this type of stuff to show that a house is in a safe area, or on the other hand, I guess the reality reigns in that. But I'm going to ask you, the benefit to the public, we get it from the service. We get it from us. And that, give me some examples of how the public benefits by this, if you don't mind. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I am.
Well, certainly, I think viewing myself as a private citizen as well, the first thing I did when we had our data up there was check my area, the things that have been happening related to my residents, or areas that are of interest to me. I think it offers an engagement tool for me to see just the volume of work being done by the police service as well. And when you zoom out to, as far as time is concerned, to more than a few weeks, you find those incidents already have to be clumped together because of the volume of work going on. And you get an idea of just how much is.
And I can see tourism using it. I can see a lot of other people using this too. All you have to do is go on and just imagine, this is where I cottage, this is where I drive, this is where my kid's buying a house and stuff like this, and we'll all take advantage of this down the way. And this has been a community meeting so far. The hub model was great news, and this one here is a benefit to the community. So thank you, kudos to you, Chief, and your staff on something like this. So thank you for your presentation. Oh, Member Barrett, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I just had one more technical question just to have, while you're there, to have the opportunity to ask. The timing, I see a breakdown of, and because I know it's live and it's recent, but it goes back to February 8th or something like that. As this progresses forward in time, how much of a backlog does this keep? In other words, when I look at the trending for a particular area or neighborhood, how far back will it go? Will it be like for the last 12 months, or will it show trending kind of moving forward kind of in perpetuity?
I think I'll defer to somebody that actually knows the answer.
Once the data is uploaded, it's there forever. So, I mean, 5 years from now, if you want to search what happened today, that data will still be available to you.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. But will it have the option to break it down by time? In other words, right now, let's say, I guess I'm up on Port Colborne, 5 violent, 7 property crimes, et cetera. As the incident trends moving forward, will that just amalgamate 5 years worth of data? So in other words, I'd hate for it to look like it's an extreme understanding it's 5 years worth of data, not a couple of months, something like that.
So through you, Mr. Chair, you can set the parameters of how you want that. So if you wanted the last week, if you wanted the last year, if you wanted the last month, if you wanted the last 2 days, or if you wanted the last 5 years, you could set those parameters.
That's great, thank you.
No further questions? All those in favor of receiving this? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, now, I'm sorry, Chief, you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, with regards to your comments, I just wanted to, from a value that is added to the community, I just wanted to say that really it serves as a great crime prevention tool for us to prompt the community to have those discussions with their neighbors and whatnot who may be using the tool, to be aware that there's thefts occurring or property crimes occurring in their area, which will prompt them to, take additional steps to secure their property, make sure their doors are locked in their houses, their cars are locked and whatnot. So we really see that there's a lot of positive in terms of a crime prevention strategy as well.
Thank you for that. And I remember, and I won't say the community, but there was a community in the Niagara region that complained about a bunch of thefts and things like that. And then we found out that they were leaving the doors open, unlocked, things in cars and things like this. This might wake them up to look and see that things are happening in their area, and they might move to another step or whatever the case may be. So thank you for that. Okay, I'd like to move to consent agenda items. I'd like to move items 24 to 29 in block, if I could, please. Can I have a mover and seconder on this? Member Caslin, Member Stewart. Who wants to start off with any questions on, well, Member Genzel, you had number 26. If you want to start off, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This goes back to the report that I mentioned earlier. This is number 26, Communications Dispatch. It's an update under our bylaw. And it deals with the, some comments in here about drop calls, and I know what they are. My question is, many years ago when we implemented 911, which I think was in 1987, if I recall. If you have a caller that calls in and they hang up, and you have an address, obviously, for the anti-alley system, so you know where the address is there still the term 3-tier response? So you don't know what the problem is that we dispatch fire, ambulance, and police to that type of call? That was the protocol way back in the late 80s. Has that changed? And what is how do we respond as a central answering service to a call we get? They hang up, we don't know what's there.
So with regards to, we capture those as unknown 911 calls. Right now, we are the police service or the agency that's responding to those 911 calls. We notify the fire and EMS of those situations, and then it's up to them as to whether or not they choose to respond to those situations. But as it stands now, it's us responding to those unknown 911 calls.
So a call such as that does generate a response from us, and a police vehicle will attend with an officer.
That's correct. We're looking at being able to integrate our CAD system with EMS. We're both using ProQA as well, so we're looking to further integration with regards to the ProQA systems to downstream that data to them, what we can downstream to them automatically, and then they can make a determination based on the call whether they want to attend and whether or not they have any history with that particular address. All of those things can factor into whether or not they respond.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions on item 26? Okay, I do. I have a comment. These reports are so interesting for me because I started in '74 on this force, and I was thrown in communications in '75, I believe it was, and we had a map and a microphone. That's all, and phones. And That's all we had. We had no training. It's so much better now. I'm not trying to knock as much then because we didn't know any better. But, I mean, I remember sitting at Port Colborne and Welland Council, and I didn't know where I was sending the cars. I didn't know where the cars were, and it was so inefficient now. Then I read the report of how people have to write tests and your training and that, and I'm so proud of how it has gone. When people always say it's not as good as it used to be, well, in this case, it's better than it used to be on a lot of these things, officer note-taking. So I'm just venting a little bit here, but for somebody that was there, and Chief, I believe you started in '84, and that certainly improved from them. We learned from our mistakes, I guess, over the course of time, but you know, it'd be nice to compare the two down the way, and there's a lot of Mike Gamble, all those ones that I worked with, and those Damien Prant and that, but we were all there. To see it now, it's so much better and that, so thank you for this. I just wanted to say that. Do you have any other items? Any other items on consent agenda? Okay, I'll continue. Item number 29, the collection of identifying information, the carding report we have. Chief, I'm putting you on the spot, and I don't mean to, but your opinions, because again, I'm old school. I recognize the times when you should be able to go up and just ask people things without going through all this. And anybody that was there before had those opinions, but I recognize how we had to change. So I'm vanilla on this. But everybody, it was like the sky was falling when this came out in Toronto, and a place like this. That it's going to kill police officers for investigations and that. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I am. Could I get an opinion from of how it is after so many months of doing this now?
Obviously, it's the law of the land now, so it's the legislation in Ontario, so we'll comply with the legislation. There are, I think there's some unintended consequences that have resulted from the legislation. I don't, I think that in some cases, officers are not engaging in situations where they otherwise would have engaged in situations in the past. And again, when you look at the data previously of our what were captured in Versadex as street checks, there were a lot of things that were captured in there. For instance, traffic ticket warnings were captured within our street check data. So it's really hard to compare apples to apples in terms of what we were doing before to what we're doing now. We know from the data that we have a very low number. I think it's 40 interactions that have been documented. We certainly never want to discourage our members from having interactions with members of the public when it's appropriate. But obviously, we want to make sure that we adhere to the legislation as well. And we look forward to our discussion next week with Justice Tulloch, who is coming here in his review of the new legislation, and to talk about those unintended consequences that have resulted from this legislation.
Thank you, and we'll be meeting Justice Tulloch as well on this. But is there a review date of this? And I use this example in the carding, in the marijuana proposed legislation coming out, because these things are being forced on us, and do they ever come up with a review date of a year from now to see, did we get it right, did we get it wrong, what changes can we make?
I don't know of a particular review date, but I believe that's the whole purpose of Justice Tulloch's review, to assess whether or not they got it right with regards to the legislation. And as you know, when that legislation was initially drafted, there was a number of stakeholders that provided input as to what they felt was necessary in the legislation. So the review that's being undertaken by Justice Tulloch, I guess, will provide some insight as to, you know, whether it's leaning too far to the right or leaning too far to the left, and make some tweaks and adjustments so that those unintended consequences, I guess, can be corrected.
Okay, thank you for that. Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. And on that item, through you to the Chief, I'm looking forward to Justice Tulloch as well. I'm planning to be here for that. Just curious with Justice Tulloch's review, is there the belief among the chiefs in the province that review may lead to some tweaking in the regulations even though the legislation may not alter the regulations and how all of this is applied might be tweaked a little bit based on his findings?
I haven't heard whether or not that's the view of Justice Tulloch. I think it's fair to say that there will likely be some tweaks coming from it, and we would look forward to those tweaks.
Okay, all those in favor of receiving these? Carried. New business, item number, well, let's move new business in block, please. They're all set. Well, okay, item number 30 and 31, please. I'd just like to move those two in block if we can. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Member Ganzel, Member Caslin. Comments or questions on item number 30 or 31? Member Ganzel.
I would be remiss, Chair, not to make some comments on 31 regarding our the cancer run. I can't stress how important that is to our community and our participation in that, and I think this is, again, an extremely worthwhile activity to be involved in. But I also have to say on 30, I'm doing two because it's an motion on two items. I hope that our it's a women's hockey group that's going to Buffalo. Is this men's or women? It's men's? Okay. I don't want to put a hex on this, but let's bring back gold on this. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I've seen some of the guys play hockey before, and I can't guarantee any gold.
Any other comments on these items? I have one. So I hear you all three played, oh, I'm sorry, I'm back to Cindy again. Well, I'm sorry. When Brett was sitting there, all three of you played hockey. I know, Bill, you had a career in it, and I understand from your kids that you were good players. Are either any of you three considering lacing up and in default, Brett? I'm looking at you. I'm not getting any answers.
I'll speak for myself. I'm not considering lacing up for this tournament, at least at this time, anyways.
Member 40, did we hire him for his hockey talents? I don't think so, but
I can confirm that over the Christmas holidays, I brought my gear back with me to Ontario, but I have not yet put it on. So
okay.
I'm in transition, I guess. I'm.
The answer is no, I take it. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of receiving these two items? Carried. Item number 32, the Canadian Association of Police Governance Membership Renewal. A mover and seconder, please. Member Ganzel, Member Stewart. Any comments or questions on this item? I just have one, Chief. I always expect that if you feel that we shouldn't be in something or something's worthy down the way, that you'll comment on it. So with no comment, I'll take it for granted that it's a benefit for us. Obviously, this is for us. Okay. All those in favor of this? Carried. Item number 33, Police Services Board Committee representation. Mover and seconder on this, please. I'll look to my right. Member Caslin, Member Barrick. Comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Item number 34, Police Services Board, Annual Report on Board Activities. Mover and seconder on this item. I'll look to my left. Member Ganzel, Member Stewart. Any comments or questions on this item? All those in favor? Carried. Police, number 35, Police Services Board Bylaw, Licensing Bylaw. Mover and seconder on this one, please. Member Caslin, Member Stewart. Comments on this item? We don't need Woody at all for any comments on this item? Okay. No, we've already discussed this, so. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next, we have some in-camera reports that are being moved out into public. I'd like to move number C10 to C13 in block, please. May I have a mover and seconder on this? Member Stewart, Member Caslin. Any comments on any of these items that are to be made public? I see none. All those in favor? Carried. Deb, supplemental on this, is there? Is this it for public? Is there any new business in public? Seeing none, thank you very much. That's it for the public agenda. I'll wait for the cameras or whatever to stop. Thank you.